engagement is the key, right? And this is the key to approach an employer or a set of employers. If you are not prepared to do that, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. And that means doing everything we've talked about. So, you have to know the culture, the environment, right? The personalities, things of that nature. And then you have to align yourself with that, if that makes sense, right? So, again, once you've established your network, your marketing plan, what's the best way to engage a potential employer? Is it through referrals and networking? Potentially. But once you get in front of that particular representative of that organization, right, how do you approach it, right? How do you engage them? Are you making sure that you're talking about the most important things, right? What is going to resonate with this particular employer or this hiring authority? In other words, how are you going to impress upon them what you can bring, what your value is? How do you demonstrate that value? And you're going to use everything that you've already ultimately assessed, right? So it could be, hey, maybe this is an organization that loves virtual engagement. Maybe they're totally remote. Well, asking for an informational session at the Starbucks may not necessarily be the approach. Maybe asking for a Zoom. It's as nuanced as that. Just really being able to engage the culture. This is why you have to put yourself in the position of the organization, right? Are you calling a landline, right? Maybe that's not going to work, right? Maybe they want to do Zoom. Maybe they want to do Twitter. Maybe they want you to go to their own Slack channel. I have no idea, but see, these are the things. This is your engagement. How are you approaching, right? Are you, tracking people down through LinkedIn or through something else? Those are the types of things. If you see a particular employer that's out there and they're tweeting things, well, Twitter might be your platform. I'm just talking about, this is how you engage. Big today is communication. Is it texting, right? The traditional forms of outreach are still there, but what is the preferred? This is matching yourself up with the culture. This is integrating yourself with that organization and really making an impression upon them that you're actually a good fit for their organization, right? So understanding and knowing the culture of an organization can help drive your approach and your engagement, if that makes sense, right? It also comes down to, you go to a lot of career prep and job search prep, and they talk about dress and how to present yourself. And a lot of people really defer to the traditional, conventional business attire. That stuff is still potentially true. However, it's much more nuanced than that, because you want to make sure that you're showing the employer, the potential employer, that you fit into their culture, right? It could be, if you're used to wearing suits and things like that, and it happens to be a very casual culture, you're really going to want to adapt to that, right? You might not want to show up in a full suit. It depends. It depends on the industry. It depends upon their work environment, their culture. They're going to want someone who really can adapt to that particular culture, right? It could be hybrid environment, remote work. All of these things are going to come into play as you're engaging. So you need to make sure that you're speaking their language to align yourself. So that's what we talk about when we talk about a communication strategy and engagement. How do you build professional rapport with a potential organization, right? How do you sell yourself in the resume, application, face-to-face? All of these things. How do you appeal to that particular employer? All of these things. So you can't take a conventional approach to it. That's why everything is unique. When I train recruiters, I always tell them, every recruit is unique. Don't ever take a recruiting opportunity for granted. Every recruit is unique. Everyone is different. Everyone is going to respond differently. Things are going to resonate differently with folks. Same thing when you flip it around, right? The employer, you need to know you really need to know what's going to resonate with them. What's going to help drive more interest in you? You have to have that, because if you're talking one language and they're talking the other, that's probably a mismatch. And it might not necessarily, you may be qualified and you might be the person, you might be the fit for that organization, but because we're not matched up here, there's a mismatch, it doesn't come out. And ultimately, the patience level and the time that people will give you is very short. And that's unfortunate, but it's the natural tempo of this process. That's why you have to hit it quick. You have to really, come out of the gate in a positive fashion to really keep their attention. So, again, it's all about what the focus is. Keep it there. Everything else can be noise. So that's why a very well-researched, very well-prepared approach is going to be much better for you, right? And that's where the probability of success really starts to get higher when you're doing all of this. Again, a lot of people take these small things for granted, but I can tell you that it really does pay dividends if you really follow this particular methodology and this approach, okay? And again, as I mentioned here, making a connection with the screener, the recruiter, the hiring authority, the entire life cycle, right? The entire life cycle, you actually have to make that connection from the person that might have originally called you or the first person that you may have engaged with throughout that life cycle. And I mention these terms because these are the typical people that you engage with in this prep conversation, right? You want to make sure that you make an impression on everyone that you come into contact with. At the same time, you're collecting information as well, right? Even though you've done all that research, the ability to ask questions, right? To collect as much information to help prepare you as well. So that all of that goes in. And sometimes you need to practice this, right? Sometimes maybe you approach a company that you're not interested in working in, right? To practice this out. I used to teach when folks would go to job fairs. I would always say, hey, if there's 30 companies at the job fair, pick the 20 you're interested in and then practice with 10 of them before you go talk to those 20, right? Because it gets the butterflies out, it gets you a little confidence, you're a little more seasoned up, those types of things. Sometimes you have to do that, and because it's a lot of times this can feel awkward, right? And if we're not used to it, or we're very uncomfortable with sort of the cold approach, as many people are. There's nothing wrong with that, but practicing and sort of generating that muscle memory towards it really can help you, because you want to be confident. You want to be able to communicate with confidence. I can tell you that is a huge impression that you make on an employer when you're very confident, you're very comfortable with your experience, your expertise. That is big, right? That is big with an employer. They want folks that are sure of themselves and come across as a subject matter expert, which you would be doing through that self-assessment, which again, as I mentioned, as you break all of that down, those are the types of things that you can actually use, in your marketing, right? Really understanding what the challenges of that organization is and being able to talk to it. So if you want to ask questions, and this may have come out in the research, what is the challenge that they're having in these roles, right? Not necessarily starting with an elevator pitch. And I will tell you, a lot of people, or a lot of organizations, I should say, and I see this in military transition and everything, is, your elevator speech. Nothing wrong with that, but again, is your elevator speech speaking to that employer, or is it speaking to you? You have to really tweak and tailor it. Nothing wrong with an elevator speech as long as you are hitting the mark for that particular employer. Because if you're telling me about the 20 years of experience that you have here, I may not necessarily have a need for that, and we're not really getting to the solution that I'm looking for as the employer, right? So keep that in mind. That's why everything has to be thought out. This is a very nuanced process and methodology, because again, you sometimes only get a, sort of one shot at the title, if you will, in your approach to some of these employers, because again, they are feeling the pressure, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's a hiring authority, an executive. Their time is precious a lot of times, and they really want to be wowed initially. And that's not always easy to do, because a lot of this you're going to go just on the research and everything. But the more focused you are, the more precision focused you are, the higher likelihood of success that you're going to have. Again, it's all about your approach. It's all about, again, the assessment, the research, the marketing of yourself in the proper areas, and then ultimately how you're going to engage a particular employer or set of employers. So understand you need to resonate. So everything that you bring has to be important, or at least of interest to that employer. Give you examples of where folks have, you know, at least from my experience and others, because I live and breathe this stuff. This is all I really do on my day job. And then, of course, as you know, I sit on a lot of boards and I do a lot of volunteer work in the recruitment area, and spent, you know, a lot of years in this. And I can tell you, one of the things that I can tell you, and I was always the type that would go to a job fair or a career session, and as folks approached me, I would give them a little bit of, you know, productive feedback to say, hey, when you are approaching someone, make sure that you're very specific, make sure that you're, you know, you're delivering value for something specific, because I'm looking for something specific, okay? So if you come to me and say, I can do this, 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 and this, I did sales, I did HR, I did this, and then I'm looking at your resume as you're telling me this, and I'm not seeing evidence of that, that is not a good way to start off, because people will lose confidence in you, and it comes across as desperation. So again, that is lack of preparation. I could tell that a lot of people were not prepared to come and talk to me, and I get it. You go to a job fair, you want to talk to everybody, and you may not necessarily have done the research, and that's fine too, but approach it that way. Say, hey, I came here, I'll tell you what, I came here to talk to 20 companies. I really didn't know much about your organization. Can you tell me a little bit about it? I don't want to take much of your time. Be aware, right? And when I mentioned social awareness is this. In an engagement, right, make sure you're not dominating time. If you know that there are people, again, whether it's in a virtual environment, whether it's in person, be very aware of their time, right? Because you have representatives there, and I'm just using sort of a job fair type of environment as an example. You know you've got a bunch of people behind you, right, in line. Let's just say that. It's a very, very crowded area, or if it's in virtual. Be mindful of their time. Take advantage of that. I can tell you that people would dominate the time, and over time, if you're not really hitting it on the head, and they haven't actually said that they were going to follow up with you, you might want to move on. So there's that social awareness in addition to your self-awareness to make sure that you're leaving an impression on the organization. So these are the things that I'm talking about as far as engagement, right? Those types of things. Understand you're going to need to really make your case quickly, and then ask for a follow-up and things of that nature. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that comes across pretty clear. And that's all part of that self-assessment. Really break it all down. I don't actually have a template for that. I'm not saying they might exist. It's very, very possible. If anyone has ever worked with a coach, typically coaches will develop their own. I usually will walk, if I'm mentoring someone, I usually walk them through that to come up with their own, because people are comfortable with different things. And I try to tailor and mold it to the individual and really break it down. Sometimes there's a pro and con, and I will really put you on the spot to say, hey, tell me this. Things of that nature. So if you're working for a coach, if you're working with a coach, let them challenge you. They probably do, and they should. They should really challenge you as to what your strengths and weaknesses are and things of that nature. So you have to be willing to really admit some things, right? Because again, it's going to make you better at what you're doing. Believe me, I got all kinds of weaknesses and faults. We all do, and I'm not shy in telling you, but it also helps me, right? It really helps me in my day-to-day. I know my strengths as well, and I play to those, but certainly there's that downside. And believe me, there are environments that I know I cannot work in, and I know that. And I've challenged myself in the past, and I know that some environments are not going to make me as driven and successful. It's not to say that I'll stay away from them. However, I know myself very, very well. So understand your self-awareness and the social awareness. So I hope that makes sense to everyone here.